Who are the forgotten Anglo-Saxon heroes, and what are their legends? What do you know about the forgotten heroes of the Anglo-Saxon era and the legends that surround them? These are the tales of bravery, wisdom, and resilience that have been overshadowed by more famous historical figures but are no less important. Let's bring these unsung heroes back to life and explore their incredible stories. In the heart of ancient Britain, long before the Norman conquest, there were heroes whose names have been lost to time. These are the forgotten Anglo-Saxon warriors, kings, and leaders whose legends still echo through the ages. The Anglo-Saxon period, spanning from the 5th to the 11th centuries, was a time of great upheaval and transformation in Britain. Amidst the invasions, battles, and the gradual formation of a unified England, several figures emerged whose contributions have been overshadowed by more famous individuals such as King Alfred the Great and William the Conqueror. Today, we shine a light on these lesser-known heroes and their remarkable stories. The brave warrior, Hereward the Wake. Our first hero is Hereward the Wake, a legendary figure known for his resistance against the Norman invaders. Hereward's story is one of defiance and courage, as he led a band of rebels in a series of daring raids and battles. Despite being outnumbered, his strategic brilliance and unyielding spirit made him a symbol of resistance. Early life and exile. Hereward, believed to have been born around 1035, was the son of an Anglo-Saxon nobleman. His early life was marked by conflict and exile. According to legends, his rebellious nature and a violent incident led to his banishment from England. During his exile, Hereward honed his skills as a warrior, gaining experience and allies across Europe. Resistance against the Normans. In 1066, William the Conqueror defeated King Harold II at the Battle of Hastings, marking the beginning of Norman rule in England. However, Hereward returned from exile, determined to resist the invaders. He gathered a band of loyal followers and launched a series of guerrilla attacks against Norman forces. His most famous exploit was the defense of the Isle of Ely, a natural fortress in the marshlands of Cambridgeshire. Hereward and his men held out against the Normans for several years, conducting daring raids and inflicting significant damage. Legacy and legend. Hereward's resistance made him a folk hero, and his exploits were celebrated in numerous ballads and tales. Although the details of his life are shrouded in myth, his legend endures as a symbol of defiance against tyranny. Hereward the Wake represents the indomitable spirit of the Anglo-Saxon people in the face of overwhelming odds. The wise king, Aethelstan. Next, we turn to Aethelstan, often considered the first true king of England. His reign was marked by significant achievements, including the unification of various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and the establishment of a strong, centralized government. Aethelstan's wisdom and vision laid the foundation for the England we know today. Early reign and unification. Aethelstan, born around 894, was the grandson of Alfred the Great. He ascended to the throne in 924, following the death of his father, King Edward the Elder. Aethelstan quickly demonstrated his political acumen by consolidating power and forging alliances with other kingdoms. His most notable achievement was the unification of the various Anglo-Saxon and Viking territories into a single realm. Battle of Brunanburh. One of the defining moments of Aethelstan's reign was the Battle of Brunanburh in 937. Faced with a coalition of rival kings from Scotland, Strathclyde, and Viking-held Dublin, Aethelstan led his forces to a decisive victory. This battle is often regarded as one of the most significant in British history, as it confirmed Aethelstan's dominance and the unity of his kingdom. Cultural and legal contributions. Beyond his military accomplishments, Aethelstan was a patron of learning and culture. He established a network of churches and monasteries, promoting education and religious reform. Aethelstan also codified laws, which helped to strengthen the governance and judicial systems of his realm. His reign is often seen as a golden age of Anglo-Saxon England, marked by peace, prosperity, and cultural flourishing. The resilient leader, Edric the Wild. Edric the Wild, another remarkable figure, led a fierce resistance against the Normans in the Welsh borders. Known for his guerrilla tactics and unyielding determination, Edric's story is one of resilience and relentless pursuit of freedom. Early life and resistance. Edric, also known as Edric Sylvaticus, was a nobleman from Shropshire. After the Norman conquest, he refused to submit to William the Conqueror's rule. Instead, Edric retreated into the wilderness of the Welsh borders, from where he launched a series of attacks against Norman forces and collaborators. His knowledge of the local terrain and his ability to mobilize support from both Anglo-Saxons and Welsh allies made him a formidable opponent. Alliance with Welsh princes. Edric's resistance was characterized by his strategic alliances with Welsh princes, who were also hostile to Norman rule. Together, they conducted raids and ambushes, disrupting Norman supply lines and communication. Edric's actions inspired other pockets of resistance across England, contributing to the broader struggle against Norman domination. Enduring legacy. Though ultimately unable to overthrow the Normans, Edric the Wild's relentless fight against the invaders left an indelible mark on the history of Anglo-Saxon resistance. His story is a testament to the spirit of defiance and the enduring hope for freedom, even in the face of insurmountable odds. The legendary queen, Ethelflaed. Ethelflaed, the Lady of the Mercians, was a formidable leader and warrior queen. She played a crucial role in defending her kingdom against Viking invasions and was instrumental in the reconquest of Danish-held territories. Ethelflaed's leadership and strategic acumen earned her a place among the greatest rulers of her time. Early life and marriage. Ethelflaed was born around 870, the daughter of Alfred the Great. She married Ethelred, the Lord of Mercia, and together they worked to defend their kingdom against Viking incursions. After Ethelred's death, Ethelflaed assumed control of Mercia, ruling as a queen in all but name. Military campaigns and governance. As leader of Mercia, Ethelflaed proved to be a brilliant military strategist. She led numerous campaigns against the Vikings, reclaiming key territories and fortifying her kingdom's defenses. Ethelflaed also played a crucial role in the alliance with her brother, King Edward the Elder, which helped to unify the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Cultural and religious contributions. In addition to her military achievements, Ethelflaed was a patron of religious and cultural institutions. She founded churches and promoted learning, contributing to the spiritual and intellectual life of her kingdom. Ethelflaed's legacy is one of strength, wisdom, and unwavering dedication to her people. Conclusion. These forgotten heroes of the Anglo-Saxon era remind us that history is filled with incredible stories waiting to be rediscovered. Their legends continue to inspire us with their bravery, wisdom, and resilience. In celebrating Hereward the Wake, Ethelstan, Edric the Wild, and Ethelflaed, we honor the rich and diverse heritage of medieval England. Their contributions to the cultural, political, and military fabric of their time underscore the complexity and depth of Anglo-Saxon history. As we bring these unsung heroes back to life, we gain a greater appreciation for the multifaceted nature of medieval society and the enduring impact of these remarkable individuals. Thanks for listening. Like and comment. And please subscribe, as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066. Stay curious. The 871 Battle of Reading, a critical nexus in the Viking confrontation with Anglo-Saxon England. The Viking incursions of the late 9th century represent a watershed in the historiography of the British Isles, as they catalyzed profound political, cultural, and military transformations. Central to this era of upheaval is the Battle of Reading, 871, a significant conflict that pitted the West Saxons, under the joint leadership of King Ethelred and Alfred, later known as Alfred the Great, against the Viking Great Heathen Army. Let us examine the broader context of the Viking expansion, the tactical and strategic dynamics of the engagement at Reading, and evaluate its reverberations on the trajectory of Anglo-Saxon resilience and eventual consolidation. The Viking invasions, a contextual framework. The Viking Age, commencing in the late 8th century, marked a period of Scandinavian maritime expansion characterized initially by episodic raids and later by sustained campaigns of conquest and colonization. The Great Heathen Army, a confederation of Norse warriors, landed in East Anglia in 865 with the explicit aim of dismantling the fragmented polities of Anglo-Saxon England. By the end of 870, the Vikings had secured substantial territorial gains, including Mercia, and turned their focus on Wessex, the last redoubt of organized resistance. The West Saxons, led by Ethelred and his younger sibling Alfred, faced a uniquely sophisticated adversary. The Viking forces combined tactical adaptability with strategic depth, leveraging their mobility and expertise in siegecraft. Against this backdrop, the Battle of Reading emerged as a critical engagement, reflecting both the immediacy of the Viking threat and the resolve of Wessex to preserve its sovereignty. Strategic preliminaries and the capture of Reading. The Vikings' occupation of Reading in late 870 underscored their strategic acumen. Situated at the confluence of the rivers Thames and Kennet, Reading afforded the invaders a defensible stronghold and a logistical hub for further incursions into Wessex. The site's dual advantage of natural defensibility and access to waterways enhanced the Vikings' operational flexibility, enabling them to consolidate their territorial gains and launch subsequent campaigns with impunity. Recognizing the existential implications of Viking entrenchment, Ethelred and Alfred mobilized their forces to mount an offensive aimed at dislodging the enemy and reclaiming the town. Anatomy of the Battle of Reading. The confrontation at Reading on January 4, 871, was marked by a complex interplay of tactical maneuvers and operational contingencies. The West Saxon forces, despite their numerical strength, faced formidable Viking fortifications. Their initial assault, characterized by direct frontal engagements, was thwarted by the Vikings' superior defensive positioning and disciplined counteroffensive led by commanders such as Halfdan Ragnarsson. The terrain around Reading, interspersed with waterways and marshland, further impeded the West Saxon advance, providing the Vikings with natural advantages that compounded their strategic ingenuity. The outcome was a decisive defeat for the West Saxons. Casualty figures were significant, and the morale of the Wessex army suffered a severe blow. The Viking response, combining aggression with calculated exploitation of the battlefield terrain, exemplified their operational sophistication. The loss at Reading forced a retreat, leaving Wessex vulnerable to further incursions. This defeat underscored the necessity of tactical evolution within the West Saxon ranks, highlighting both the limitations of frontal assaults against fortified positions and the imperative for strategic innovation. Consequences and Alfred's leadership evolution. Although the Battle of Reading constituted a tactical debacle for Wessex, its long-term implications were paradoxically constructive. In the immediate aftermath, the kingdom endured a succession of engagements, including the pivotal Battle of Ashdown, where Alfred demonstrated nascent military acumen. These engagements collectively provided a crucible in which Alfred's strategic thinking and leadership were tempered. The cumulative experience of these battles honed Alfred's strategic sensibilities, fostering an emphasis on defensive infrastructure, guerrilla tactics, and naval innovation, hallmarks of his later campaigns. The psychological and strategic lessons derived from reading also catalyzed broader reforms within Wessex. Recognizing the inadequacies of their current military apparatus, the West Saxons implemented significant restructuring of the militia system and fortified urban centers, burhs. These adaptations not only mitigated the immediate threat but also laid the groundwork for Wessex's ascendancy as a unifying force in England. The integration of burhs into a network defense system, coupled with a focus on rapid mobilization and logistical support, represented a paradigm shift in the kingdom's approach to warfare and governance. Broader implications for Anglo-Saxon England. The Viking onslaught, epitomized by engagements such as reading, served as a crucible for the transformation of Anglo-Saxon governance and military praxis. The exigencies of defending against a relentless adversary necessitated innovations in administrative centralization, resource mobilization, and collective identity formation. Alfred's leadership during this era epitomized these dynamics, earning him the appellation the Great and establishing Wessex as the nucleus of a unified England. Moreover, the Viking invasions precipitated a recalibration of cultural and political paradigms within Anglo-Saxon society. The relentless incursions underscored the need for cohesive state structures capable of withstanding external pressures, thereby accelerating the transition from fragmented heptarchies to a consolidated monarchy. This period also witnessed an ideological transformation, with the concept of kingship increasingly intertwined with the defense of Christian civilization against pagan adversaries, a narrative that bolstered the legitimacy of Alfred's subsequent reforms and unification efforts. Strategic retrospectives and legacy. In hindsight, the Battle of Reading reveals itself as a microcosm of the larger Viking Anglo-Saxon conflict. While ostensibly a tactical defeat, the engagement highlighted the vulnerabilities and strengths of both sides, offering valuable insights into the dynamics of early medieval warfare. For the Vikings, Reading underscored the efficacy of fortified encampments and the strategic exploitation of terrain. For Wessex, the battle's aftermath served as an impetus for profound military, political, and cultural innovation. Alfred's eventual success in repelling the Vikings and laying the foundation for a unified England can be traced to the lessons of Reading and subsequent engagements. The integration of learned strategies, from fortifications to adaptive military doctrines, exemplified Alfred's capacity for synthesis and foresight. His vision transformed Wessex from a beleaguered kingdom into the linchpin of a nascent English nation-state. The 871 Battle of Reading occupies a pivotal place in the historical continuum of the Viking invasions of England. While a tactical defeat, the engagement illuminated the existential stakes for Wessex and provided critical lessons that informed subsequent strategies of resistance and recovery. The legacy of Reading is inextricably linked to Alfred's evolution as a statesman and military innovator, whose vision ultimately steered Wessex toward unity and resilience. As a microcosm of the larger Viking Anglo-Saxon conflict, Reading exemplifies the complexities of leadership, adaptation, and endurance in the face of systemic upheaval. Its enduring significance lies in its role as both a harbinger of challenges to come and a catalyst for transformative change within Anglo-Saxon England. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, and subscribe to Medieval Chronicles 1066 for more journeys back to the Middle Ages. Stay curious. What do you know about the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain? What are the myths versus realities? The Anglo-Saxon period in British history, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 11th centuries, is a defining era that has shaped the identity and culture of modern England. The narrative of this period has often been framed as a tale of brutal invasion and conquest, where Germanic tribes overran the native Romano-British population, leading to the establishment of new kingdoms and the birth of what would become England. However, this traditional story, steeped in myth and popular imagination, has been increasingly scrutinized by modern historians and archaeologists. Let's explore the myths and realities of the Anglo-Saxon invasion, delving into the historical sources, archaeological findings, and modern interpretations that provide a more nuanced understanding of this pivotal time. We will examine the transformation of Britain from a Roman province to a land dominated by Anglo-Saxon culture, addressing the political, social, and cultural changes that accompanied this transition. By disentangling myth from reality, this discussion will shed light on the complexities of the Anglo-Saxon settlement and its enduring legacy in British history. Historiography and sources. The story of the Anglo-Saxon invasion has been shaped by a limited but influential set of historical sources. Among these, the writings of Gilders, Bede, and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle stand out as primary texts that have framed our understanding of this period. However, these sources are not without their limitations, as they were written with specific agendas and within particular contexts that influence their narratives. Early historical accounts. Gilders, a 6th-century British cleric, provides one of the earliest accounts of the Anglo-Saxon arrival in Britain in his work De Excidio et Conquestu Britanniae, on the ruin and conquest of Britain. His portrayal of the Anglo-Saxons as a divine punishment for the sins of the Britons casts the invaders in a decidedly negative light. Gilders's account, however, is more of a moral lament than a precise historical record, lacking specific dates and often relying on hyperbolic language to convey his message. As a result, while Gilders offers valuable insights into the perceptions of the time, his work must be approached with caution. Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, written in the early 8th century, provides a more comprehensive and organized account of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. As a monk of Anglo-Saxon heritage, Bede presents the Anglo-Saxons as the rightful heirs to Britain, chosen by God to establish a new Christian order. His work is invaluable for its detail and chronology, yet it is also shaped by his religious perspective and the political context of his time. Bede's narrative, while more reliable than Gilders's, still reflects the biases of a Christian scholar writing in a period of ongoing religious and cultural transformation. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a collection of annals compiled in the late 9th century, offers another critical perspective on the Anglo-Saxon period. The Chronicle provides a year-by-year account of events, beginning with the Roman occupation and continuing through the Norman conquest. However, the Chronicle's early entries, particularly those concerning the 5th and 6th centuries, are often sparse and vague, raising questions about their accuracy. Compiled long after the events it describes, the Chronicle reflects the concerns and perspectives of its Anglo-Saxon authors, particularly those associated with the West Saxon royal house. Archaeological evidence. In contrast to the literary sources, archaeological evidence provides a more tangible and often less biased glimpse into the Anglo-Saxon period. Over the past century, excavations across Britain have unearthed a wealth of artifacts and structures that have reshaped our understanding of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. One of the most significant discoveries is the Sutton Hoo burial site, which dates to the early 7th century. The site, particularly the ship burial, reveals the wealth and sophistication of the Anglo-Saxon elite, showcasing a range of artifacts including weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial items. These findings highlight the connections between the Anglo-Saxons and other Germanic cultures, suggesting a society that was deeply engaged in trade and cultural exchange. Archaeological evidence also challenges the narrative of a sudden and violent Anglo-Saxon invasion. Excavations of Romano-British and early Anglo-Saxon sites indicate a more gradual transition, with evidence of continuity in settlement patterns and material culture. For example, the persistence of Roman-style buildings and the gradual adoption of Anglo-Saxon burial practices suggest a process of assimilation rather than outright displacement. These findings point to a complex and multifaceted interaction between the incoming Anglo-Saxons and the native Britons. Modern interpretations. In recent decades, historians and archaeologists have increasingly questioned the traditional narrative of the Anglo-Saxon invasion as a sudden and violent conquest. Instead, they have proposed a more nuanced understanding that emphasizes migration, cultural exchange, and the gradual nature of the settlement process. Genetic studies have played a crucial role in this re-evaluation, revealing that the modern British population is a mix of Anglo-Saxon, Romano-British, and other ancestries. This genetic continuity suggests that the Anglo-Saxon settlement involved significant intermarriage and integration with the existing population, rather than a wholesale replacement. Historians such as Nick Hyam and Martin Welsh have argued for a regional approach to understanding the Anglo-Saxon settlement, highlighting the diversity of experiences across different parts of Britain. In some regions, particularly those with strong Roman influence, the transition to Anglo-Saxon rule appears to have been more gradual and less disruptive. In others, the settlement may have involved more conflict and displacement. This regional variation underscores the complexity of the Anglo-Saxon period and challenges the notion of a uniform or monolithic invasion. The Anglo-Saxon invasion, myth versus reality. The traditional narrative of the Anglo-Saxon invasion has often been framed as a tale of violent conquest, where Anglo-Saxon warriors swept across Britain, destroying the remnants of Roman civilization and imposing their rule over the native Britons. This narrative, however, is increasingly seen as a myth that oversimplifies the complexities of the period. The myth of a violent conquest. One of the most enduring myths about the Anglo-Saxon invasion is the idea that it was a violent and all-encompassing conquest that resulted in the complete subjugation of the Romano-British population. This view, shaped by early historical accounts and popularized in later centuries, depicts the Anglo-Saxons as ruthless invaders who brought about the collapse of Roman Britain and established a new Germanic-dominated society. This narrative has been reinforced by various cultural representations, from medieval chronicles to modern films and television series, which often portray the Anglo-Saxon invasion in starkly dramatic terms. The image of Anglo-Saxon warriors laying waste to towns and villages, driving the native Britons into the mountains or into exile, has become a powerful and persistent trope in the telling of British history. Reality, migration and assimilation. Modern scholarship, however, paints a very different picture of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. Rather than a sudden and violent conquest, the Anglo-Saxon arrival in Britain appears to have been a more gradual process of migration and settlement, characterized by significant cultural exchange and assimilation. Archaeological evidence suggests that many Romano-British settlements continued to be inhabited well into the Anglo-Saxon period, with evidence of gradual changes in material culture rather than abrupt displacement. The presence of hybrid cultural forms, such as the blending of Roman and Anglo-Saxon burial practices, indicates that the incoming Anglo-Saxons interacted with and were influenced by the native population. This process of assimilation likely involved intermarriage, trade, and the sharing of cultural practices, leading to the emergence of a new, mixed society. Debunking common myths. Several other myths about the Anglo-Saxon invasion have been challenged by recent research. One such myth is the idea of an ethnic cleansing, where the Anglo-Saxons supposedly exterminated or displaced the native Britons entirely. Genetic studies, however, have shown that the modern British population is not exclusively of Anglo-Saxon descent but rather a mix of different ancestries, including Romano-British, Anglo-Saxon, and later Viking and Norman elements. This genetic continuity suggests that the native population was not wiped out but rather absorbed into the new social and cultural framework. Another myth is the notion that the Anglo-Saxons imposed their language and culture on the native population through force. While Old English eventually became the dominant language in Britain, this process took several centuries and likely involved a complex interplay of social, economic, and cultural factors. The persistence of certain Romano-British elements, such as place names and legal customs, further suggests that the transition was not as complete or as abrupt as the traditional narrative might imply. The role of local power structures. Understanding the role of local power structures is crucial to grasping the realities of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. Rather than viewing the Anglo-Saxons as a monolithic invading force, it is more accurate to see them as diverse groups with varying levels of power and influence, who interacted with local leaders and communities in different ways. In some regions, particularly those with strong Roman influence, local elites may have negotiated with the incoming Anglo-Saxons, leading to a more peaceful and gradual integration. This could explain the continuity of certain Roman institutions and practices in these areas, as well as the relatively smooth transition to Anglo-Saxon rule. In other regions, where Roman influence was weaker, the settlement process may have been more disruptive, with greater levels of conflict and displacement. These regional variations highlight the complexity of the Anglo-Saxon settlement and challenge the notion of a uniform or violent conquest. Cultural exchange and hybridization. Another important aspect of the Anglo-Saxon settlement is the extent to which it involved cultural exchange and hybridization. The archaeological record reveals numerous examples of this, such as the blending of Anglo-Saxon and Romano-British burial practices, the adoption of certain Roman building techniques by the Anglo-Saxons, and the presence of Roman-style goods in Anglo-Saxon graves. This process of cultural exchange was likely facilitated by intermarriage and social integration between the Anglo-Saxons and the native population. The resulting hybrid culture would have been shaped by the contributions of both groups, leading to the development of a distinctive Anglo-Saxon identity that was nonetheless deeply influenced by Romano-British traditions. Re-evaluating the concept of invasion. Given the evidence of migration, assimilation, and cultural exchange, it is worth re-evaluating the concept of the Anglo-Saxon invasion itself. The term invasion implies a sudden and aggressive incursion, often accompanied by violence and destruction. However, the reality of the Anglo-Saxon settlement seems to have been far more gradual and complex, involving a series of migrations and interactions over several centuries. Some historians have argued that the term migration might be a more accurate description of the process, as it better reflects the movement of peoples and the gradual nature of the changes that occurred. This shift in terminology also helps to move away from the simplistic and often misleading narrative of a violent conquest, allowing for a more nuanced understanding of the period. The impact of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. While the traditional narrative of the Anglo-Saxon invasion may be an oversimplification, there is no denying that the settlement had a profound impact on Britain. The arrival of the Anglo-Saxons brought about significant changes in the political, social, and cultural landscape of the island, laying the foundations for the development of early medieval England. Politically, the Anglo-Saxon settlement led to the fragmentation of Roman Britain into a series of smaller, often competing, kingdoms. These kingdoms, such as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria, would go on to play a crucial role in the history of Britain, shaping the development of its political institutions and identity. Socially, the Anglo-Saxon settlement introduced new forms of organization, such as the manorial system and the concept of the hundred as a unit of local administration. These innovations would have a lasting impact on the structure of society, influencing the development of feudalism in the later medieval period. Culturally, the Anglo-Saxon settlement led to the introduction of Old English as the dominant language, as well as the spread of Anglo-Saxon art, literature, and religious practices. The synthesis of Anglo-Saxon and Romano-British traditions would create a unique cultural heritage that would continue to influence Britain for centuries to come. In summary, while the myth of a violent Anglo-Saxon conquest may have shaped popular perceptions of the period, the reality was far more complex. The Anglo-Saxon settlement was a multifaceted process involving migration, assimilation, and cultural exchange, with significant regional variations in the experiences of different communities. By re-evaluating the evidence and challenging the traditional narrative, modern scholarship has provided a more nuanced and accurate understanding of this pivotal period in British history. Political and social impact of the invasion. The Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain had profound political and social consequences, leading to the transformation of the island from a Roman province into a series of independent kingdoms with their own distinct cultures and identities. The changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement were not only immediate but also had long-term implications, shaping the development of medieval England and leaving a lasting legacy that can still be seen in modern British society. Transformation of political structures. One of the most significant impacts of the Anglo-Saxon settlement was the transformation of Britain's political landscape. The collapse of Roman rule in the early 5th century left a power vacuum that was gradually filled by the emerging Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. These kingdoms, which initially began as small tribal territories, eventually grew into larger political entities, each with its own king and governing structures. The establishment of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms such as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria marked a fundamental shift in the political organization of Britain. Unlike the centralized administration of the Roman Empire, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were characterized by a more decentralized form of governance, with power often concentrated in the hands of local kings and their warrior elites. These kings ruled over their territories through a combination of military force, personal loyalty, and religious authority, creating a new political order that was distinct from both Roman and native British traditions. The concept of kingship itself was also transformed during the Anglo-Saxon period. While the Romano-British leaders had been influenced by Roman models of leadership, the Anglo-Saxon kingship was rooted in Germanic traditions, emphasizing the role of the king as a war leader and protector of his people. This warrior ethos was reflected in the legal and social structures of the time, with the king's authority often tied to his ability to lead in battle and reward his followers with land and wealth. However, the influence of Roman political traditions did not disappear entirely. In some regions, particularly in the more Romanized parts of Britain, elements of Roman administration and law continued to be used, even as Anglo-Saxon rulers established their own systems of governance. This blending of Roman and Germanic traditions contributed to the development of a distinctive Anglo-Saxon political culture that would later form the basis of the English state. Socio-cultural changes. The Anglo-Saxon settlement also brought about significant changes in the social structure of Britain. The introduction of the Anglo-Saxon system of land ownership and governance led to the establishment of a new social hierarchy, with the king and his nobles at the top, followed by free men and slaves. This hierarchical system was closely tied to the land, with wealth and social status determined by the ownership of land and the ability to produce food and other resources. The social organization of Anglo-Saxon England was based on the concept of kinship and loyalty, with local lordships playing a central role in the functioning of society. The relationship between a lord and his followers was one of mutual obligation, with the lord providing protection and resources in exchange for military service and loyalty. This system of reciprocal obligations would later evolve into the feudal system of the medieval period, with the manorial system serving as its foundation. Culturally, the Anglo-Saxon settlement led to the introduction of new forms of art, literature, and religious practices. The Old English language gradually replaced Latin and Brittonic languages as the dominant language of Britain, and Anglo-Saxon art, with its distinctive motifs and styles, began to flourish. The introduction of Anglo-Saxon law codes, such as the laws of King Ine of Wessex and King Alfred the Great, also had a lasting impact on the legal traditions of Britain, influencing the development of English common law. Continuity and change. Despite the significant changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement, there were also areas of continuity, particularly in regions that had been heavily Romanized. Many aspects of Roman and Romano-British culture persisted, particularly in the realms of religion, urban life, and infrastructure. The survival of Roman towns, roads, and villas in some areas indicates that the Anglo-Saxons did not completely abandon the Roman way of life. For example, in the city of Canterbury, which became the center of the Anglo-Saxon Church in England, there is evidence of continued use of Roman buildings and infrastructure well into the Anglo-Saxon period. Similarly, the Roman road network continued to be used by the Anglo-Saxons, facilitating trade and communication across the island. The process of cultural exchange and assimilation also meant that Anglo-Saxon society was not entirely distinct from its Romano-British predecessor. The blending of traditions can be seen in various aspects of material culture, such as the fusion of Germanic and Roman motifs in art and architecture. This hybrid culture reflected the complex and dynamic nature of the Anglo-Saxon settlement, where elements of both Roman and Anglo-Saxon traditions coexisted and influenced each other. The development of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The political and social changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement laid the groundwork for the development of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, which would go on to dominate the political landscape of early medieval England. These kingdoms were characterized by a high degree of regional diversity, with each kingdom developing its own unique identity and traditions. The process of kingdom formation was closely tied to the concept of kingship, with successful kings often expanding their territories through conquest or marriage alliances. Over time, the smaller tribal territories were absorbed into larger kingdoms, leading to the emergence of powerful states such as Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria. These kingdoms would play a crucial role in the history of Britain, particularly in the resistance to Viking invasions and the eventual unification of England under a single monarchy. The development of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms also had a significant impact on the social structure of Britain. The consolidation of power in the hands of the king and his nobles led to the creation of a more stratified society, with a clear distinction between the ruling elite and the common people. This stratification was reinforced by the legal and social institutions of the time, such as the Guild system, which assigned a monetary value to individuals based on their social status. Religious transformation and the Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons. One of the most significant social changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement was the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. The process of Christianization began in earnest with the mission of St. Augustine in 597 AD, who was sent by Pope Gregory the Great to convert the pagan Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Augustine's mission, which was initially focused on the Kingdom of Kent, marked the beginning of a wave of Christianization that spread across Anglo-Saxon England over the next few centuries. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons had a profound impact on the social and cultural landscape of Britain. The introduction of Christianity led to the establishment of the Church as a central institution in Anglo-Saxon society, with bishops and abbots playing a key role in both religious and secular affairs. The spread of monasticism also contributed to the development of learning and literacy, as monasteries became centers of education and the production of written texts. The Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons was not a straightforward process, however. In many cases, pagan beliefs and practices continued to coexist with Christianity for some time, leading to a blending of religious traditions. This syncretism is evident in various aspects of Anglo-Saxon culture, such as the use of pagan symbols in Christian contexts and the continuation of certain pre-Christian rituals alongside Christian worship. The long-term impact of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. The political and social changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement had long-term implications for the development of medieval England. The establishment of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms laid the foundation for the creation of a unified English state, while the social and legal institutions introduced by the Anglo-Saxons influenced the development of English common law and governance. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity also had a lasting impact on British society, shaping the religious and cultural identity of the English people. The synthesis of Anglo-Saxon and Christian traditions created a distinctive cultural heritage that would continue to influence Britain for centuries to come. Thus, the political and social impact of the Anglo-Saxon settlement was profound, leading to the transformation of Britain from a Roman province into a series of independent kingdoms with their own distinct cultures and identities. While the traditional narrative of the Anglo-Saxon invasion may have been oversimplified, the reality of the settlement was complex and multifaceted, involving migration, assimilation, and cultural exchange. The changes brought about by the Anglo-Saxon settlement laid the groundwork for the development of medieval England and left a lasting legacy that can still be seen in modern British society. Religious impact: the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity is one of the most significant aspects of the Anglo-Saxon period, marking a profound transformation in the religious, cultural, and social fabric of early medieval England. The process of Christianization began in earnest at the end of the 6th century and continued throughout the 7th and 8th centuries, reshaping the spiritual landscape of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and leaving a lasting impact on the development of English identity. Pre-Christian beliefs of the Anglo-Saxons. Before their conversion to Christianity, the Anglo-Saxons practiced a form of Germanic paganism, which was polytheistic and closely tied to their cultural and social structures. The pantheon of Anglo-Saxon gods included deities such as Woden, Odin, the chief god associated with war and wisdom, Tuna, Thor, the god of thunder, and Tyr, the god of justice. These gods were worshipped through rituals, sacrifices, and the construction of sacred sites, such as groves and altars. The Anglo-Saxons believed in a world inhabited by supernatural beings, including elves, spirits, and giants, and they practiced rituals designed to appease these forces and ensure the protection and prosperity of their communities. The Anglo-Saxons also had a strong belief in fate, known as Wyrd, which governed the course of events in their lives. This belief in a predetermined fate was reflected in their literature, most notably in the epic poem *Beowulf*, where the hero's struggles against fate and his ultimate acceptance of it are central themes. The concept of Wyrd was deeply intertwined with their understanding of the world and their place within it, shaping their approach to life, death, and the afterlife. Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity began with the mission of St. Augustine of Canterbury, who was sent by Pope Gregory the Great in 597 AD to evangelize the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Augustine's mission was initially focused on the Kingdom of Kent, where King Ethelbert had married a Christian Frankish princess, Bertha, who played a crucial role in facilitating the mission's success. Ethelbert's conversion to Christianity marked the beginning of a wider process of Christianization, as other Anglo-Saxon kings and nobles followed suit, often motivated by political and social considerations as much as by religious conviction. The spread of Christianity among the Anglo-Saxons was a gradual process, with varying degrees of resistance and acceptance across different regions and social groups. In some cases, the conversion was a top-down process, initiated by the king and his court and then disseminated to the wider population through the influence of the Church. In other cases, the adoption of Christianity was more localized and piecemeal, with pagan practices continuing alongside Christian worship for some time. The establishment of the Anglo-Saxon Church played a central role in the Christianization of England. Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury, and his successors established dioceses and monasteries across the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. These religious institutions became centers of learning, culture, and political power, contributing to the spread of Christianity and the consolidation of the Church's influence. Monasteries such as those at Lindisfarne and Jarrow became renowned for their scholarship and played a key role in the production and preservation of Christian texts, including the Gospels and the works of the Church Fathers. Fusion of pagan and Christian practices. The process of Christianization in Anglo-Saxon England was not a simple replacement of pagan beliefs with Christian ones. Instead, there was a significant degree of syncretism, where elements of paganism were incorporated into Christian practices, leading to a unique blend of religious traditions. This fusion is evident in various aspects of Anglo-Saxon culture, including art, literature, and religious rituals. One example of this syncretism is the continued use of pagan symbols and motifs in Christian contexts. The Anglo-Saxon cross, a key symbol of Christianity, often featured intricate carvings that included both Christian imagery and traditional Germanic motifs, such as animals, warriors, and interlacing patterns. This blending of symbols reflected the complex process of cultural adaptation that accompanied the spread of Christianity. Another example is the adaptation of pagan festivals and rituals into the Christian calendar. The celebration of Christmas, for instance, coincided with the pagan festival of Yule, which marked the winter solstice. Similarly, the festival of Easter, which commemorates the resurrection of Christ, was associated with the pagan festival of Easter, a celebration of spring and renewal. By aligning Christian holidays with existing pagan traditions, the Church was able to facilitate the transition to Christianity and make the new religion more palatable to the Anglo-Saxon population. The fusion of pagan and Christian practices is also reflected in the literary and artistic achievements of the Anglo-Saxon period. The epic poem Beowulf, while rooted in pre-Christian traditions, contains Christian elements and themes, such as references to God and the struggle between good and evil. Similarly, Anglo-Saxon art, particularly manuscript illumination, combined Christian iconography with traditional Germanic styles, creating a distinctive artistic tradition that reflected the cultural synthesis of the period. The role of the Church in Anglo-Saxon society. The Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons had a profound impact on the structure and functioning of society. The Church became one of the most powerful institutions in Anglo-Saxon England, influencing not only religious life but also politics, education, and law. Bishops and abbots were often closely associated with the royal courts, advising kings and playing a key role in the administration of the kingdom. The Church's influence extended to the legal system, where Christian principles were incorporated into Anglo-Saxon law codes, such as those of King Ethelbert and King Alfred the Great. Monasteries, in particular, became important centers of learning and cultural production. They were responsible for the education of the clergy and the preservation of religious and secular texts. The monastic scriptoria produce some of the most important works of Anglo-Saxon literature, including the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a key historical record of the period, and the illuminated manuscripts of the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells, which are masterpieces of early medieval art. The Church also played a crucial role in the integration of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into the broader Christian world. The establishment of dioceses and the organization of the Church along Roman lines helped to create a sense of unity and identity among the Anglo-Saxon peoples, contributing to the development of a shared English identity. The Church's connections with Rome and the wider Christian world also facilitated cultural and intellectual exchanges, bringing new ideas and influences to Anglo-Saxon England. Thus, the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity was a complex and multifaceted process that had a profound impact on the religious, cultural, and social life of early medieval England. The fusion of pagan and Christian traditions created a distinctive religious culture that reflected the unique history and identity of the Anglo-Saxon peoples. The Church became a central institution in Anglo-Saxon society, shaping not only religious life but also politics, education, and law, and leaving a lasting legacy that would continue to influence England for centuries to come. Long-term legacy of the Anglo-Saxon invasion. The long-term legacy of the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain is evident in many aspects of modern British culture, language, law, and identity. While the traditional narrative of a violent and total conquest has been largely debunked, the impact of the Anglo-Saxon settlement on the development of England is undeniable. The period between the 5th and 11th centuries, often referred to as the Anglo-Saxon period, laid the foundations for many of the institutions, cultural practices, and social structures that would define medieval and modern England. Cultural legacy. One of the most enduring legacies of the Anglo-Saxon period is the Old English language, which forms the basis of modern English. The Anglo-Saxon settlers brought with them their Germanic dialects, which over time evolved into Old English, the language of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. While Old English underwent significant changes following the Norman conquest in 1066, many of its core elements, including vocabulary, grammar, and syntax, survived and continue to shape the English language today. A large proportion of common English words, including those related to everyday life, law, and governance, have their origins in Old English, highlighting the deep influence of the Anglo-Saxon period on the linguistic heritage of Britain. The literary achievements of the Anglo-Saxon period also form a crucial part of England's cultural legacy. Works such as Beowulf, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, and the poetry of Caedmon and Cynewulf have had a lasting impact on English literature, influencing later writers and contributing to the development of a distinctive English literary tradition. The themes, styles, and forms of Anglo-Saxon literature continue to resonate in modern English literature, demonstrating the enduring relevance of this early period. Anglo-Saxon art and craftsmanship, particularly in the fields of metalwork, manuscript illumination, and architecture, also left a significant legacy. The intricate designs and techniques developed during this period are seen in artifacts such as the Sutton Hoo treasure and the Lindisfarne Gospels, influenced the artistic traditions of later medieval England and beyond. The aesthetic principles of Anglo-Saxon art, characterized by a combination of intricate patterns, symbolic motifs, and a strong connection to nature, can still be seen in various aspects of British art and design. Political legacy. The political structures established by the Anglo-Saxons laid the groundwork for the development of the English state. The concept of kingship, as it evolved during the Anglo-Saxon period, emphasized the king's role as both a military leader and a guardian of the law, a dual responsibility that would become central to the medieval English monarchy. The division of the kingdom into shires and hundreds, administrative units introduced during the Anglo-Saxon period, provided the basis for the organization of local government in England and remained in use for centuries. The Anglo-Saxon legal system, which combined elements of customary law, royal decrees, and Christian principles, also had a lasting impact on English law. The Were-Guild system, which assigned monetary values to individuals based on their social status, influenced the development of compensation and reparation principles in later English law. The concept of trial by jury, which has its roots in the Anglo-Saxon practice of summoning local men to give verdicts in legal disputes, became a cornerstone of the English legal system and continues to play a central role in the administration of justice in many English-speaking countries today. The idea of an Anglo-Saxon identity, based on shared language, culture, and legal traditions, played a crucial role in the formation of a unified English kingdom. By the 9th and 10th centuries, under the leadership of kings like Alfred the Great and Æthelstan, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms began to coalesce into a single entity, laying the foundation for the Kingdom of England. This process of unification, driven by both military conquest and legal and administrative integration, was a key development in the creation of a cohesive English state. Religious and intellectual legacy. The Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons and the establishment of the Anglo-Saxon Church had a profound impact on the religious and intellectual life of England. The Church became a central institution in Anglo-Saxon society, influencing not only religious practices but also education, art, and governance. The monastic tradition that developed during this period laid the foundations for the rich intellectual and cultural life of medieval England. The production of religious texts, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells, as well as the translation of biblical and liturgical works into Old English, contributed to the spread of Christian learning and literacy. The monasteries of Anglo-Saxon England, such as those at Jarrow, Lindisfarne, and Glastonbury, became renowned centres of scholarship and played a key role in preserving and transmitting classical and Christian knowledge to later generations. The Anglo-Saxon Church also contributed to the development of a distinct English Christian identity, which combined elements of Roman Christianity with local traditions and practices. This synthesis of religious traditions helped to shape the religious culture of medieval England and influence the development of the English Church, which would later assert its independence from Rome under the leadership of figures like Thomas Becket and King Henry VIII. Debate on the Anglo-Saxon identity. In modern times, the concept of an Anglo-Saxon identity has been both celebrated and contested. On one hand, the Anglo-Saxon period is often viewed as the foundation of English culture and institutions, with its contributions to language, law, and governance seen as defining elements of English identity. On the other hand, the use of Anglo-Saxon as a racial or ethnic term has been criticized for its exclusionary connotations and its misuse in certain ideologies. Historians and archaeologists continue to debate the extent to which the Anglo-Saxon invasion should be seen as a defining moment in British history. While it is clear that the Anglo-Saxons played a crucial role in shaping early medieval England, the reality of their impact is far more complex than the traditional narrative suggests. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxon period is not simply a matter of ethnic or cultural inheritance, but is also a product of centuries of interaction, adaptation, and integration with other peoples and traditions. The enduring influence of the Anglo-Saxon period. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxon period can still be seen in many aspects of modern British life, from the structure of local government and the legal system to the language and cultural traditions that define English identity. The period's influence is also evident in the continuing fascination with Anglo-Saxon history and culture, as seen in the popularity of historical novels, television programs, and archaeological discoveries related to the period. Therefore, the long-term legacy of the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain is a testament to the enduring impact of this formative period in English history. While the traditional narrative of a violent conquest has been largely discredited, the contributions of the Anglo-Saxon period to the development of English culture, language, law, and governance are undeniable. The period's legacy continues to shape the identity and institutions of modern Britain, reflecting the complex and dynamic history of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. Conclusion. The Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain has long been a subject of historical fascination and debate, with the traditional narrative of a violent and total conquest giving way to a more nuanced understanding of migration, assimilation, and cultural exchange. The reality of the Anglo-Saxon settlement was far more complex than the simplistic accounts of early chroniclers suggest, involving a gradual process of integration and adaptation that reshaped the political, social, and cultural landscape of Britain. By critically examining the myths and realities of the Anglo-Saxon invasion, we have sought to challenge the conventional wisdom and offer a more balanced perspective on this pivotal period in British history. The discussion has highlighted the limitations and biases of the early historical sources, the insights provided by archaeological evidence, and the shifting interpretations of modern scholarship. In doing so, we have demonstrated that the Anglo-Saxon settlement was not a uniform or monolithic event but rather a series of migrations and interactions that varied significantly across different regions and communities. The political and social impact of the Anglo-Saxon settlement was profound, leading to the fragmentation of Roman Britain into a series of independent kingdoms, the transformation of social structures, and the introduction of new cultural practices. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity further reshaped the spiritual and intellectual life of the period, creating a distinctive religious culture that blended pagan and Christian traditions. The long-term legacy of the Anglo-Saxon period is evident in the development of the English language, the formation of political institutions, and the enduring influence of Anglo-Saxon law, art, and literature. While the concept of an Anglo-Saxon identity has been both celebrated and contested in modern times, there is no denying the significant contributions of the period to the formation of English identity and the development of the English state. In conclusion, the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain was a complex and multifaceted process that had a lasting impact on the history of England. By moving beyond the myths and exploring the realities of the period, this essay has provided a more comprehensive and accurate understanding of the Anglo-Saxon settlement and its significance in the broader history of Britain. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxon period continues to shape modern British society, reflecting the deep and enduring influence of this formative era in the nation's history. Thanks for listening. Like and comment. And please subscribe, as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066. Stay curious.
The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity was a monumental shift in the religious, cultural, and political landscape of early medieval England. This transformation, spanning from the late 6th to the 8th centuries, was marked by strategic missionary efforts, the influential roles of key figures like Augustine, Queen Bertha, and King Ethelbert, and the establishment of monastic centers. These changes not only brought new religious beliefs, but also introduced new concepts of kingship, law, and cultural expression. The process faced significant challenges, including resistance from pagan elements and the external threat of Viking invasions. This essay explores the complexities and impact of the Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons, highlighting the enduring legacy of this pivotal period in English history. Part 1. The pre-Christian Anglo-Saxon world. Religious beliefs and practices. Before the spread of Christianity, the Anglo-Saxons practiced a polytheistic religion with a pantheon that included deities such as Woden, the god of wisdom, war, and death; Thor, the god of thunder and storms; Tiw, associated with law and heroic glory; and Freya, the goddess of fertility, love, and beauty. These gods were integral to the Anglo-Saxon worldview, influencing various aspects of life from warfare to agriculture. The worship of these deities involved rituals and sacrifices conducted at sacred sites like groves, springs, and standing stones, which were believed to be inhabited by spirits. The religious practices of the Anglo-Saxons were closely tied to the natural and social order. The changing seasons, marked by festivals such as Yule and Midsummer, were celebrated with rituals aimed at ensuring fertility, prosperity, and protection. Religious leaders, including priests and seers, played crucial roles in conducting these rituals, offering sacrifices, and interpreting omens. They acted as intermediaries between the gods and the people, guiding the community in both spiritual and practical matters. Archaeological finds, such as the Sutton Hoo burial site, provide valuable insights into the religious and cultural practices of the pre-Christian Anglo-Saxons. The Sutton Hoo site, with its richly adorned ship burial, reflects a blend of pagan and early Christian elements. The burial included items such as weapons, armor, and ceremonial objects, indicating a belief in an afterlife where the deceased would continue their warrior lifestyle. The presence of Christian symbols alongside pagan artifacts suggests a transitional period where elements of both belief systems coexisted. Social and political structures. Anglo-Saxon society was structured hierarchically, with the king at the top, followed by noble warriors, thanes, free peasants, ceorls, and slaves. The king's role was both political and religious, often perceived as a figure endowed with divine favor, which legitimized his rule. This belief in divine kingship was crucial in maintaining social cohesion and legitimizing the authority of the ruling elite. Kinship played a central role in Anglo-Saxon social organization. Extended families, or kin groups, were the primary units of social structure, providing support and protection for their members. This kinship system was reflected in the laws and customs of the time, which emphasized loyalty, honor, and retribution. The concept of wergild, or man price, was a key aspect of Anglo-Saxon law, representing the value of a person in monetary terms. This system provided a means of compensation for injury or death, helping to prevent cycles of revenge and maintain social order. The warrior ethos was deeply ingrained in Anglo-Saxon culture. Bravery, loyalty, and honor were highly valued, and the King's Hall was a central place where these values were celebrated and reinforced. The hall served as a place for feasting, storytelling, and the administration of justice. It was also a symbol of the king's wealth and power, showcasing the treasures and gifts that were distributed to loyal followers. Interactions with Christian neighbors. Even before the formal missionary efforts, the Anglo-Saxons had contact with Christian communities, particularly through interactions with the Britons and the Irish. The Britons, who had been Christianized during the Roman period, maintained a Christian presence, especially in the western regions of Britain. Additionally, Irish missionaries, known for their distinctive monastic tradition, played a significant role in spreading Christian teachings across the British Isles. These interactions facilitated a cultural and religious exchange that laid the groundwork for later conversion efforts. Artifacts such as the St. Ninian's Isle treasure, which features Christian symbols alongside traditional Anglo-Saxon motifs, indicate an early blending of traditions. This treasure, discovered on an island in Shetland, includes silver and gold items decorated with Christian iconography, suggesting that some level of Christian influence was already present among the Anglo-Saxons. The presence of Christian symbols in a predominantly pagan context suggests a gradual process of religious change, where elements of Christianity were incorporated into existing belief systems. This syncretism likely made the transition to Christianity smoother, as it allowed the Anglo-Saxons to adopt new beliefs without completely abandoning their traditional practices. Part 2. The Early Missionary Efforts. Augustine's mission, 597 AD. Pope Gregory the Great's decision to send Augustine to England in 597 AD was a significant step in the Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons. Gregory's motivation for this mission was both spiritual and political. According to tradition, Gregory was inspired by a chance encounter with Anglo-Saxon youths in a Roman slave market, which led him to remark, "Non angli, sed angeli," not angles, but angels, reflecting his desire to convert these people to Christianity. Augustine and his fellow monks landed in Kent, a strategically important kingdom ruled by King Ethelbert. Ethelbert's marriage to Queen Bertha, a Christian Frankish princess, provided a favorable context for Augustine's mission. Bertha's influence was crucial, as she had already established a Christian presence at the court, with her chaplain, Bishop Liudhard, conducting services in St. Martin's Church in Canterbury. Upon Augustine's arrival, he was received cordially by King Ethelbert, who was curious about the new faith but cautious about abandoning his traditional beliefs. Augustine's approach was gradual and respectful, which was essential in gaining the king's trust. Ethelbert's eventual conversion, influenced by Augustine's teachings and Bertha's persuasion, was a landmark event. As a powerful king, Ethelbert's acceptance of Christianity set a precedent for other rulers and nobles to follow. Augustine established a monastery in Canterbury, which became the center of the English Church. He was consecrated as the first Archbishop of Canterbury, a position that would grow in influence as the Christian community expanded. Augustine's mission faced numerous challenges, including linguistic barriers and resistance from pagan elements, but his success in converting Ethelbert and many of his subjects marked the beginning of a broader Christianization process in England. The role of King Ethelbert and Queen Bertha. Queen Bertha played a pivotal role in the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons. Her Christian background and marriage to Ethelbert created a bridge between the Frankish Christian world and the pagan Anglo-Saxons. Bertha's presence at the Kentish court provided Augustine with a powerful ally and a supportive environment for his mission. Her chaplain, Bishop Liudhard, had already established a small Christian community, which served as a foundation for Augustine's efforts. King Ethelbert's conversion had far-reaching implications for the spread of Christianity in England. As one of the most powerful Anglo-Saxon kings, Ethelbert's conversion lent legitimacy to the new faith and encouraged other rulers and nobles to follow suit. His support was further demonstrated by the issuance of a law code that incorporated Christian principles. This code, known as Ethelbert's Law, is one of the earliest known Anglo-Saxon legal texts and reflects the growing influence of the Church in secular matters. Ethelbert's Law provided protections for church property and clergy and established fines for offenses against Christian institutions. This legal recognition of the Church's authority was a significant step in the institutionalization of Christianity in Anglo-Saxon England. The code also illustrates the early integration of Christian ethics into the legal and social framework of the kingdom, highlighting the transformative impact of the new religion. Spread to other kingdoms. The conversion of other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms often followed a similar pattern, with royal conversions leading to wider acceptance among the populace. In Northumbria, the marriage of King Edwin to Ethelbert, a Christian princess from Kent, played a crucial role in his eventual conversion. The missionary Paulinus accompanied Ethelbert to Northumbria and became a key figure in the region's Christianization. King Edwin's conversion was marked by a dramatic public declaration of faith, followed by a mass baptism of his court and subjects. This event was influenced by political considerations, as alignment with the Christian Kentish kingdom offered strategic advantages. Edwin's conversion was also facilitated by a series of visions and miracles, which convinced him of the truth of the Christian faith. The spread of Christianity in Northumbria was further consolidated by the efforts of Irish missionaries, such as Aidan, who established the monastery of Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne became a center of Christian learning and missionary activity, playing a crucial role in the further spread of Christianity in northern England. The monastery produced important religious texts and trained a new generation of Christian leaders. The Synod of Whitby in 664 AD was a significant event in the history of the English Church. The Synod was convened to resolve differences between Roman and Celtic Christian practices, particularly concerning the calculation of Easter. The decision to adopt the Roman method was pivotal in unifying the English Church and aligning it more closely with the broader European Christian community. This decision helped to standardize Christian practices across the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and facilitated greater cohesion within the Church. Part 3. The Role of Monasticism. Foundation of Monasteries. Monasteries were central to the Christianization of Anglo-Saxon England, serving as hubs of religious, cultural, and intellectual life. The establishment of monasteries like Lindisfarne, Jarrow, and Wearmouth played a crucial role in the spread and consolidation of Christianity. These institutions were not only centers of worship but also places of learning, where monks and nuns copied manuscripts, produced religious texts, and educated new converts. The foundation of monasteries often involved significant support from local rulers, who provided land and resources. This support was part of a broader pattern of patronage, where the church and the monarchy formed a mutually reinforcing relationship. Monasteries also played a key role in the economy, engaging in agricultural production and trade, which further integrated them into the social fabric of Anglo-Saxon society. The establishment of monastic communities was instrumental in the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Monks and nuns engaged in the copying and illumination of manuscripts, preserving not only religious texts but also works of classical antiquity. This scholarly activity helped to maintain a continuity of learning and intellectual life during a period often characterized by political instability and cultural change. The role of monks and nuns. Monks and nuns were instrumental in the dissemination of Christian teachings and practices. They were often at the forefront of missionary work, traveling to pagan territories to preach and establish new Christian communities. Figures like Street Cuthbert became renowned for their piety, miracles, and pastoral care, which helped to win converts and consolidate Christian communities. Monastic communities also contributed to the cultural life of Anglo-Saxon England. The production of illuminated manuscripts, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels, showcases the blending of Christian themes with local artistic traditions. These works not only served a liturgical purpose, but also played a role in educating the populace about Christian teachings and values. The influence of monasteries extended beyond religious life. They were centers of scholarship, preserving and transmitting knowledge from classical antiquity as well as contemporary Christian thought. The Venerable Bede, one of the most notable scholars of this period, wrote extensively on history, theology, and science, providing invaluable insights into the world of early medieval England. The Synod of Whitby. The Synod of Whitby, held in 664 AD, was a crucial turning point in the history of the English Church. The Synod was convened to resolve differences between the Roman and Celtic Christian traditions, particularly concerning the calculation of Easter and the tonsure, the style of haircut worn by monks. The Synod was attended by prominent church leaders, including Bishop Wilfrid, who argued in favor of the Roman practices, and Abbess Hilda of Whitby, who hosted the event. The decision to adopt the Roman practices was influenced by King Oswiu of Northumbria, who saw alignment with Rome as politically advantageous. The outcome of the Synod not only resolved doctrinal disputes, but also helped to unify the English Church under Roman authority. This unification facilitated greater cohesion and cooperation among the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and strengthened the connection between the English Church and the broader European Christian community. Part 4. The integration of Christianity into Anglo-Saxon society. Christianity and the Anglo-Saxon kingship. The introduction of Christianity brought new concepts of kingship and governance to Anglo-Saxon England. The idea of divine kingship, where the king was seen as God's appointed ruler on earth, became a central aspect of political authority. This concept was reinforced through the anointing of kings, a ritual that imbued their rule with sacred legitimacy and aligned them with biblical figures like King David and King Solomon. The Church's endorsement became an essential aspect of royal authority, providing spiritual justification for the king's rule. This endorsement was reflected in various aspects of governance, including the issuance of laws that incorporated Christian principles and the establishment of ecclesiastical courts. The Church also played a role in mediating disputes, advising rulers, and providing moral guidance, thereby integrating into the broader framework of governance. Development of church structures. The organization of the English Church mirrored the hierarchical structure of the Roman Church. The establishment of dioceses and the appointment of bishops were critical in creating a coherent ecclesiastical framework. Major sees, such as Canterbury and York, became centers of ecclesiastical authority, with their bishops playing significant roles in both religious and secular affairs. Bishops were often key advisors to kings, involved in diplomatic missions, and sometimes even in military matters. The Church's involvement in secular governance extended to the local level, where parish priests played a role in community leadership, education, and the administration of justice. This integration of church and state helped to standardize religious practices and reinforce the authority of both institutions. The growth of the English Church also involved the establishment of synods and councils, where church leaders discussed and resolved theological and administrative issues. These gatherings were instrumental in maintaining doctrinal unity and addressing challenges such as heresy, clerical misconduct, and disputes over ecclesiastical jurisdiction. Cultural and artistic contributions. The adoption of Christianity had a profound impact on Anglo-Saxon culture and art. Christian themes became prominent in various artistic forms, including sculpture, metalwork, and manuscript illumination. The influence of Christianity is evident in the proliferation of crosses, church buildings, and religious artifacts, many of which incorporated local artistic traditions. One of the most significant cultural contributions of the Christian Church was the production of illuminated manuscripts. These manuscripts, often created in monastic scriptoria, were richly decorated with Christian iconography and served both liturgical and educational purposes. The Lindisfarne Gospels, with its intricate designs and Latin text, is a prime example of the synthesis of Christian and Anglo-Saxon artistic traditions. Christianity also influenced Anglo-Saxon literature, with religious poetry and prose becoming prominent genres. Works like The Dream of the Rood, which blends Christian theology with heroic Anglo-Saxon themes, reflect the fusion of the new faith with existing cultural elements. The Church's role as a patron of the arts helped to foster a cultural renaissance that preserved and transmitted knowledge, both religious and secular. Part 5. Challenges and Conflicts. Resistance and Reversion to Paganism. The process of Christianization was not without resistance. Some Anglo-Saxon rulers and communities were reluctant to abandon their traditional beliefs and practices. This resistance was often rooted in cultural identity, political considerations, and a deep attachment to the old ways. Notable examples include Pinda of Mercia, who remained a staunch pagan and often clashed with Christian rulers. Reversion to paganism was a recurring issue, particularly in regions where the Church's influence was weaker. The persistence of pagan practices, such as the veneration of sacred trees and stones, the use of amulets, and the celebration of traditional festivals, indicated a syncretic blending of old and new beliefs. The Church's response included both persuasion and coercion, using sermons, laws, and occasionally force to suppress pagan practices. The Church also faced internal challenges, such as disputes over the proper conduct of clergy, the administration of sacraments, and the regulation of monastic life. These challenges required ongoing efforts to maintain discipline, doctrinal purity, and the integrity of ecclesiastical institutions. Viking invasions and Christian resilience. The Viking invasions of the 8th and 9th centuries posed a severe threat to the Christianized Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The Norse invaders, who adhered to their own pagan beliefs, targeted monasteries and churches, which were often wealthy and poorly defended. The destruction of monastic centers like Lindisfarne and Jarrow disrupted the ecclesiastical infrastructure and posed a challenge to the continuity of Christian life and learning. Despite these challenges, the Anglo-Saxon Church demonstrated remarkable resilience. Figures like King Alfred the Great played crucial roles in defending Christian territory and revitalizing the Church. Alfred's reforms included the establishment of fortified towns, baths, the promotion of education, and the translation of religious texts into Old English. These efforts helped to preserve Christian teachings and ensure the Church's survival during a period of external threats. The Church also adapted to the new political realities, often negotiating with Viking leaders and converting them to Christianity. The conversion of figures like Guthrum, a Viking leader who was baptized and took the Christian name Athelstan, illustrated the Church's flexibility and ability to integrate new converts into the Christian community. Conclusion. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity was a transformative process that reshaped the religious, cultural, and political landscape of early medieval England. This transformation was marked by the strategic missionary efforts of figures like Augustine, the influential roles of Queen Bertha and King Ethelbert, and the establishment of monastic centers that served as hubs of learning and spirituality. The integration of Christianity into the social and political fabric of Anglo-Saxon society brought new concepts of kingship, law, and governance, and fostered a cultural renaissance that left a lasting legacy. Despite challenges, including resistance from pagan elements and the external threat posed by Viking invasions, Christianity became deeply embedded in Anglo-Saxon culture. The resilience of the church, the adaptability of its leaders, and the support of the monarchy were crucial in ensuring the success of the Christianization process. This period laid the foundations for the medieval English church and had enduring impacts on the development of English identity and culture. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and comment. And please subscribe for more adventures back in time to the Middle Ages. See you next time and stay curious.
Today, we're diving into a fascinating topic that's sure to intrigue history buffs and curious minds alike. Get ready to uncover the real reason why the Anglo-Saxons invaded Britain. It's a revelation that will shock you. Let's kick things off with a lesser-known angle on why the Anglo-Saxons set their sights on Britain. You might think you know the traditional reasons, but we're about to shed light on a different perspective that adds a whole new layer to this historical event. Introduction. Now, before we get into the juicy details, let's set the stage. The Anglo-Saxon invasion is often attributed to conquest, expansion, and the search for new lands. But what if there's more to the story than meets the eye? It's time to unravel the common theories and explore the historical context that shaped this pivotal moment in history. Part 1. Who were the Anglo-Saxons, and why did they migrate? So, let's start with the basics. The Anglo-Saxons were a group of tribes from what is now Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Around the 5th century, they began migrating to Britain, and this period marked the beginning of a significant transformation in the island's history. Traditional theories suggest that these migrations were driven by a combination of factors: the decline of the Roman Empire, pressure from other tribes, and the allure of Britain's fertile lands. While these factors undoubtedly played a role, they don't tell the whole story. One of the most compelling yet often overlooked aspects is the socio-political climate in Europe at the time. The Roman Empire, which had controlled Britain for centuries, was crumbling. This created a power vacuum not only in Britain but across Europe. Tribes and small kingdoms were scrambling to fill the void left by Rome's retreat, leading to increased conflict and instability. This instability was particularly acute in the regions that the Anglo-Saxons called home. Internal strife, coupled with external threats from neighboring tribes, created a perfect storm of turmoil. The Anglo-Saxons, like many others, were looking for a way out of this chaos, a new beginning in a more stable and prosperous land. But there's more. Another layer of this migration story involves climate change. Yes, you heard that right, climate change. During the early 5th century, Northern Europe experienced a series of harsh winters and poor harvests. This led to widespread famine and made life incredibly difficult for the Anglo-Saxons and other tribes. Seeking more hospitable lands with better agricultural prospects became a matter of survival. As if these factors weren't enough, there's also evidence suggesting that the Anglo-Saxon migration was not a sudden invasion, but rather a gradual process. Archaeological findings indicate that there were already established trading relationships between the Anglo-Saxons and the inhabitants of Britain before the so-called invasion. This suggests a more complex and nuanced interaction between the two groups, possibly involving mutual agreements and alliances. Now, let's dive deeper into the socio-political motivations. The Roman withdrawal from Britain left the native Britons vulnerable. They were not only dealing with the internal chaos, but also facing threats from the Picts in the north and the Irish in the west. To counter these threats, the Britons invited Anglo-Saxon mercenaries to help defend their territories. This practice, known as foederati, involved hiring foreign warriors in exchange for land or other rewards. Part 2: The Fall of the Roman Empire and the Anglo-Saxons in Britain. The initial presence of Anglo-Saxons in Britain was, therefore, not entirely hostile. They were invited guests, warriors who came to provide a service. Over time, however, the dynamic changed. As the Anglo-Saxons settled and their numbers grew, they began to establish their own power bases, leading to conflicts with the native Britons and eventually to the establishment of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. But here's the real kicker, a theory that will challenge everything you thought you knew. Some historians suggest that the Anglo-Saxon migration was driven by a profound cultural and ideological shift. This theory posits that the Anglo-Saxons were not just seeking land and resources, but were also motivated by a desire to escape a changing world back home. During this period, the Roman Empire was not only politically fragmented but also undergoing a significant cultural transformation with the spread of Christianity. The Anglo-Saxons, who were still practicing their traditional polytheistic religions, might have seen this cultural shift as a threat to their way of life. By moving to Britain, they could preserve their cultural identity and resist the tide of Christianization that was sweeping through Europe. This perspective opens up a whole new understanding of the Anglo-Saxon migration. It wasn't just about survival or conquest, it was about preserving a way of life, a culture, and an identity. This adds a profound dimension to our understanding of why the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain and how they shaped its future. To fully appreciate the complexities of the Anglo-Saxon migration, we need to delve into the historical sources and archaeological evidence that provide a window into this transformative period. Part 3: The Historical Sources. Let's start with the primary sources. One of the earliest and most significant accounts of the Anglo-Saxon arrival in Britain is found in the writings of Gildas, a 6th century British monk. In his work De Excidio et Conquestu Britanniae, On the Ruin and Conquest of Britain, Gildas describes the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons and the subsequent conflicts with the native Britons. He portrays the Anglo-Saxons as ruthless invaders who brought destruction and suffering to the land. However, it's important to note that Gildas wrote from a decidedly pro-British and anti-Saxon perspective, which might have influenced his portrayal of events. Another crucial source is the Historia Ecclesiastica Gentis Anglorum, Ecclesiastical History of the English People, written by Bede in the early 8th century. Bede, an Anglo-Saxon monk, provides a more detailed and nuanced account of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. He traces the origins of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and their conversion to Christianity, offering valuable insights into the cultural and religious transformations that occurred during this period. Bede's work, while more balanced than Gildas, still reflects the biases of his time and the interests of the Christian Church. Archaeological evidence also plays a crucial role in understanding the Anglo-Saxon migration. Excavations of burial sites, settlements, and artifacts have provided a wealth of information about the Anglo-Saxons' way of life, their interactions with the native Britons, and the gradual establishment of their dominance in the region. One notable archaeological discovery is the Sutton Hoo burial site in Suffolk, England. Unearthed in 1939, the site contains a ship burial believed to be that of an Anglo-Saxon king, possibly Raedwald of East Anglia. The burial included an array of exquisite artifacts, such as a helmet, a shield, and various items of gold and silver. These artifacts provide a glimpse into the wealth, craftsmanship, and cultural connections of the Anglo-Saxon elite. Another significant site is the village of West Stow in Suffolk, which has been extensively excavated and reconstructed as an Anglo-Saxon settlement. The findings at West Stow reveal important details about daily life, agricultural practices, and social organization in an early Anglo-Saxon community. The settlement's layout, the construction of houses, and the artifacts found there illustrate the adaptation and integration of the Anglo-Saxons into their new environment. Part 4: The migrations during the early medieval period. Moving beyond Britain, let's consider the broader context of the Germanic migrations during the early medieval period. The Anglo-Saxon migration was part of a larger movement of peoples across Europe, often referred to as the migration period, or the Volkerwanderung. This period, roughly spanning the 4th to 6th centuries, saw various Germanic tribes, such as the Goths, Vandals, Lombards, and Franks, migrating and establishing new kingdoms within the former territories of the Roman Empire. These migrations were driven by a complex interplay of factors, including population pressures, climatic changes, economic disruptions, and the weakening of Roman authority. The Anglo-Saxons were part of this broader pattern, seeking new opportunities and territories in the face of shifting political and environmental conditions. Now, let's turn our attention to the internal dynamics of the Anglo-Saxon tribes themselves. The Anglo-Saxons were not a monolithic group but rather a collection of distinct tribes, each with its own leadership, customs, and territorial ambitions. The main tribes involved in the migration to Britain were the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. The Angles originated from the region of Angel in present-day northern Germany. According to Bede, the Angles were invited by the British King Vortigern to help defend against the Picts and Scots. The Saxons came from the area around the mouth of the River Elbe, while the Jutes hailed from the Jutland Peninsula, in modern-day Denmark. Each tribe established its own foothold in Britain, leading to the formation of various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, such as Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, Kent, and East Anglia. Part 5: Anglo-Saxon Kingdoms. The process of settlement and kingdom building was gradual and often marked by conflict and negotiation. The Anglo-Saxons initially settled in coastal regions, gradually pushing inland and establishing control over larger territories. This expansion was facilitated by their superior military organization and the construction of defensive structures, such as hill forts and fortified settlements. One key element of the Anglo-Saxon military was the Fyrd, a levy of free men who served as part-time soldiers. The Fyrd was organized by local lords, who provided leadership and equipment. This system allowed the Anglo-Saxons to mobilize a large and relatively well-trained fighting force when needed, contributing to their success in conflicts with the native Britons. Another factor in the Anglo-Saxon successful settlement was their adaptability and willingness to integrate with the local population. While conflicts with the Britons were common, there is also evidence of cooperation and assimilation. Intermarriage between Anglo-Saxons and Britons, the adoption of local customs, and the gradual blending of cultures contributed to the establishment of a new Anglo-Saxon identity in Britain. Part 6: Anglo-Saxon religion and their conversion to Christianity. Religion played a significant role in the cultural and social dynamics of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. The initial phase of migration saw the Anglo-Saxons practicing their traditional polytheistic religions, worshipping gods such as Woden, tuna, and Thai. However, the spread of Christianity in Britain, which had begun during the Roman period, continued to influence the Anglo-Saxons. The conversion to Christianity was a gradual and complex process, often driven by political considerations. Kings and chieftains who converted to Christianity gained the support of the powerful Christian Church, which provided legitimacy and access to broader networks of power and influence. Missionaries, such as Saint Augustine of Canterbury, played a crucial role in spreading Christianity among the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. One of the most significant conversions was that of King Ethelbert of Kent, who became the first Anglo-Saxon king to embrace Christianity around 597 AD. His conversion was influenced by his marriage to Bertha, a Christian Frankish princess, and the missionary efforts of Augustine. Ethelbert's acceptance of Christianity set a precedent for other kings and nobles, leading to the gradual Christianization of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The establishment of Christianity brought about profound changes in Anglo-Saxon society. The Church introduced new forms of literacy, art, and architecture, fostering cultural and intellectual development. Monasteries became centers of learning and preservation of classical knowledge, contributing to the emergence of a distinctive Anglo-Saxon Christian culture. Despite the spread of Christianity, elements of the old pagan beliefs persisted for centuries, often blending with Christian practices. This syncretism is evident in various aspects of Anglo-Saxon culture, such as burial practices, where Christian symbols and pagan artifacts are found side by side. This coexistence of traditions reflects the complex and layered nature of the Anglo-Saxon identity. Conclusion: the significance of Anglo-Saxons settling in England. As we explore the reasons behind the Anglo-Saxon migration and settlement in Britain, it is essential to recognize the broader implications of these events. The arrival of the Anglo-Saxons marked the beginning of a new chapter in British history, one that laid the foundations for the development of the English nation. The Anglo-Saxon period saw the establishment of new political, social, and cultural structures that would shape the future of Britain. The formation of kingdoms, the spread of Christianity, and the blending of different cultural traditions created a rich and diverse tapestry that defined the early medieval period. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxons is still evident in many aspects of modern British culture and society. The English language itself, with its Germanic roots, owes much to the influence of the Anglo-Saxons. Place names, legal traditions, and various cultural practices also bear the imprint of this formative period. By examining the multiple factors that drove the Anglo-Saxon migration, from socio-political instability and climate change to cultural preservation and religious transformation, we gain a deeper and more nuanced understanding of this pivotal event in history. As we wrap up our exploration, let's take a moment to reflect on the insights we've gained. By approaching history from different angles, we not only enrich our understanding but also appreciate the multifaceted nature of past events. It's essential to embrace diverse perspectives and challenge conventional wisdom to truly grasp the richness of our shared history. Before we part ways, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts on today's topic in the comments below. And if you're hungry for more historical insights, be sure to check out our other videos for a deeper dive into fascinating historical mysteries. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep exploring the past to uncover the secrets of our present. See you in the next video.
What do you know about the daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant? Was it solitary, nasty, brutish, and short? Or should we take a more nuanced view of the lives of Anglo-Saxon peasants? The Anglo-Saxon period in England, roughly spanning from the 5th century until the Norman conquest in 1066, was marked by significant social, economic, and cultural changes. While much of the historical narrative focuses on kings, nobles, and warriors, the vast majority of the population consisted of peasants who lived and worked in rural settings. This essay delves into the daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant, exploring their economic activities, social structures, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. By examining archaeological evidence, historical records, and contemporary literature, we can gain a deeper understanding of the lived experiences of these often overlooked individuals. Economic activities and agricultural practices. Subsistence farming. The primary economic activity of Anglo-Saxon peasants was subsistence farming. Most peasants lived in small villages or hamlets, each surrounded by fields that were collectively known as the tun or ham. The land was typically organized into strips, with each family cultivating several strips in different fields. This system, known as open field farming, allowed for crop rotation, which was essential for maintaining soil fertility. The main crops grown included wheat, barley, oats, and rye, which provided the staples for the Anglo-Saxon diet, livestock, and animal husbandry. In addition to crop cultivation, livestock played a crucial role in the economy and daily life of Anglo-Saxon peasants. Commonly raised animals included cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens. Cattle were particularly valuable, not only for their meat but also for their milk, which could be processed into butter and cheese. Sheep were prized for their wool, which was a vital resource for clothing and trade. Pigs were relatively easy to raise and could be allowed to forage in woodlands, providing a valuable source of protein. Seasonal activities and labor. The agricultural calendar dictated much of the daily and seasonal rhythms of life. Planting, tending, and harvesting crops were labor-intensive activities that required the cooperation of the entire community. Plowing typically began in early spring, followed by sowing. Weeding and maintenance occupied the summer months, and harvesting occurred in late summer to early autumn. After the harvest, the fields were often used for grazing livestock. Winter was a time for maintenance work, such as repairing tools and buildings, and for indoor activities like spinning and weaving. Social structure and community life. Village organization. The social structure of Anglo-Saxon villages was hierarchical, yet communal in nature. At the top of the local hierarchy were the free peasants, known as ceorl, who owned their own land or leased it from a lord. They had certain legal rights and responsibilities, including participation in the local moot, assembly, and the obligation to pay taxes or provide military service. Below the ceorl were the jeber or genete, tenant farmers who worked the land in exchange for protection and a share of the produce. At the bottom were the theos or slaves, who had the least rights and performed the most laborious tasks. Roles and responsibilities. The roles and responsibilities within the village were divided along lines of gender and age. Men typically handled heavy agricultural work, such as plowing and harvesting, as well as responsibilities like constructing buildings and maintaining defenses. Women were primarily responsible for domestic tasks, including cooking, spinning, weaving, and child-rearing. However, women also participated in agricultural activities, especially during peak seasons. Children contributed by tending animals, gathering wood, and assisting in household chores. Community and festivities. Despite the hard work and rigid social structure, community life offered opportunities for socialization and recreation. Festivals and religious observances were key aspects of community life, providing occasions for feasting, music, and games. Notable celebrations included those marking the agricultural calendar, such as harvest festivals, as well as Christian holy days after the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons. These events helped to strengthen community bonds and provided a break from the routine of daily labor. Religion and beliefs. Pagan tradition. The early Anglo-Saxons practiced a form of Germanic paganism, characterized by the worship of gods and goddesses associated with natural forces and daily life. Key deities included Odin, the chief god associated with war and wisdom, Thor, the god of thunder and storms, and Frigg, the goddess of fertility and love. Rituals and sacrifices were conducted to appease these deities and seek their favor for good harvests, fertility, and protection. Conversion to Christianity. The conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity began in the late 6th century with the mission of St. Augustine, sent by Pope Gregory the Great. The process was gradual, with many communities maintaining pagan practices alongside Christian ones for some time. The church became a central institution in village life, influencing not only religious practices but also social and economic activities. Monasteries and churches served as centers of learning, literacy, and charity, and the church calendar introduced new feasts and observances. Folk beliefs and superstitions. In addition to formal religious practices, Anglo-Saxon peasants held a variety of folk beliefs and superstitions. These included beliefs in spirits and supernatural creatures, such as elves and wights, which were thought to inhabit the natural world. Folk medicine and charms were commonly used to ward off illness or bring good fortune. The blending of pagan and Christian elements often resulted in unique local customs and practices. Housing and material culture. Housing structures. Anglo-Saxon peasants lived in simple wooden houses, typically constructed from locally available materials such as timber, wattle, and daub. The houses were generally single-room structures with thatched roofs and earthen floors. The hearth was the central feature of the home, providing warmth, light, and a place for cooking. Furniture was sparse, usually consisting of wooden benches, tables, and beds made from straw mattresses. Clothing and personal adornment. Clothing was made primarily from wool and linen, materials produced from the village's own resources. Men typically wore tunics and trousers, while women wore long dresses and cloaks. Both men and women might wear leather belts and simple jewelry, such as brooches or beads, depending on their status and wealth. Footwear was usually made from leather. The colors and quality of clothing varied, with natural dyes used to produce various hues. Tools and utensils. The tools and utensils used by Anglo-Saxon peasants were primarily made from wood, iron, and bone. Agricultural tools included plows, hoes, sickles, and scythes, while household utensils comprised wooden bowls, clay pots, and iron cooking implements. The craftsmanship of these items could vary significantly, with some being quite basic and others showing a high degree of skill and artistry. The use of tools and utensils was closely tied to the daily routines of farming, cooking, and crafting. Diet and cuisine. Staples and diet composition. The diet of Anglo-Saxon peasants was largely based on what they could grow and raise themselves. Bread made from wheat or barley was a staple, accompanied by pottage, a thick stew made from vegetables, grains, and occasionally meat. The diet was supplemented with dairy products such as cheese and butter, and during times of abundance, meat from livestock or game. Fish and seafood were also consumed, especially in coastal and riverine areas. Cooking and food preservation. Cooking was typically done over an open hearth, with food either boiled in pots or roasted on spits. Bread was baked in simple clay ovens or on flat stones. Preservation methods included salting, smoking, and drying, which were essential for ensuring a food supply during the winter months. Fermented foods and beverages, such as ale and mead, were common and often safer to drink than water, which could be contaminated. Feast and famine. The diet and food availability of Anglo-Saxon peasants were closely tied to the agricultural cycle and environmental conditions. Good harvests meant plentiful food and the possibility of feasting, while poor harvests could lead to scarcity and famine. Seasonal variation also played a role, with certain foods being more available at different times of the year. Social status could influence diet quality, with wealthier peasants and landowners having access to a more varied and nutritious diet. Education and literacy. Oral tradition and storytelling. The majority of Anglo-Saxon peasants were illiterate and knowledge and culture were primarily transmitted through oral traditions. Storytelling was a key aspect of cultural life, with tales of heroes, gods, and historical events being passed down through generations. These stories often contained moral lessons or practical knowledge, such as farming techniques or local lore. The role of the church in education. The Christianization of Anglo-Saxon England brought an increase in literacy, primarily within the clergy and the monastic communities. Monasteries often maintained scriptoria where manuscripts were copied and produced, and they played a significant role in the education of the nobility and clergy. For peasants, however, direct access to education remained limited. The church did, however, influence the moral and ethical education of the community through sermons and religious instruction. Conclusion. The daily life of an Anglo-Saxon peasant was characterized by hard work, community involvement, and a close relationship with the natural world. While their lives were often marked by economic challenges and social limitations, peasants also played a crucial role in the agricultural and economic systems of medieval England. Their culture was rich in tradition, shaped by a blend of pagan and Christian beliefs, and reflected in their housing, clothing, and diet. Understanding the lives of Anglo-Saxon peasants provides valuable insight into the broader social and cultural history of early medieval England, highlighting the resilience and resourcefulness of these often overlooked members of society. Thanks for listening. Like and comment. And please subscribe, as that will help us get more videos out to those interested in the Middle Ages. See you next time on Medieval Chronicles 1066, and stay curious.